Hello, folks, and thank you for joining us in this wintry day here in Austin. Those brave souls who have made the walk all the way from the convention center to here. We thank you very much, and hopefully we'll warm you up with some electric conversation today. I'm joined by some great panelists who are going to introduce themselves in a moment. But before we do that, I just want to talk a little bit about the theme of what we're going to talk about today. My name is Nick Hayward. I'm the SVP of Automotive here at CINT, and I've been working in digital in the automotive industry for the last 20 years. And never before have I seen this amount of momentum, desire, investment, ambition to change as what we're seeing at the moment for the next 2 years. And this is driven by two key reasons. One, we have a whole new set of competitors that have joined the industry, nicely exemplified by Rivian sponsoring the whole of South by Southwest. And they're bringing in a whole new perspective, but more importantly, they're not encumbered by some of the legacy technology of some of the traditional players. So what that means is they're changing how they're approaching everything from the production of cars, the sailing of cars, customer interaction, and they're raising that bar and introducing new experiences and higher customer expectations. So there's a real need for the traditional automotives to change. And on top of that, the other key pillar is that we're seeing a huge impact from AI, and in particular generative AI, to help us move away from some of those legacy platforms. So for the first time ever, we can now really start to distance ourselves from some of the legacy technologies that were implemented pre-digitization that have been holding back the traditional automotive industry. So we now have the need to change and the ability to change, and it's going to make for a very exciting couple of years to come. Today we have a really broad range of experiences and different viewpoints on the panel, from traditional OEM through to finance, through to some of the more infrastructure elements around EV. So why don't we go ahead and introduce ourselves. Bob, do you want to go first?
Sure, you want me to stand up or just?
No, I was just, yeah. Okay. I don't know, I had a mic in my hand, so I thought I'd stand up. I'll sit down now, sorry everyone.
Yeah, so thanks, Nick. Bob Titterington, I head up partnerships for enterprise innovation at General Motors. Good to be with you guys today. And I'll apologize in advance. I had flu A about 6 weeks ago, so still coughing. Good to see you guys.
That's why I put him at the other end of the panel, but we're okay.
I was about to say, now you tell us that, right, after already up here. Guys, my name's Elizabeth Durgans, as my voice starts breaking. I lead our digital and customer experience teams at Volkswagen Financial Services here in the North American region.
Hi everyone, I'm Tom Guy. Normally when I do a panel, I'm the only person from England, so that's the only thing I've got going for me. But obviously with another person here as well from England, well, originally. So I'm the MD of Etc., which is the incubation and innovation arm of BT Group. And our job is to reimagine the assets of a 200-year-old business, create new businesses. At heart, I'm a product designer and startup founder.
Great. Well, thanks for joining me here today. So despite it only being day 3 of South by Southwest, I'm sure we've all already heard a lot about the great potential of AI, what it can do, how it's going to revolutionize our businesses. I think some of it is very real, it's very here, very now and tangible. Some of it a little bit more aspirational, and we're not quite at scale stage yet. But let's imagine we are. Let's journey into the future, and we've got our magic AI wand that can fix any problem in the world. What's your biggest pet peeve in the automotive industry that we'd use to fix that? And let's start with you, Elizabeth.
Really? So you're going to serve me. Gosh, it is actually aspirational because I don't exactly know how we would do it, but really, and it's maybe from the vantage point where I sit on the financial services side, being able to bridge the gap between the aspiration of a car, right? Who doesn't love the beautiful Rivian sitting outside, or insert the blank what your favorite car might be, but also the reality of it being your second biggest purchase if you choose to finance it or lease or spend money on it. And that divide continues to exist between the aspiration of a car and the reality of paying for it and paying the bills and maintenance, et cetera. So if I had a magic wand, there would be a better way to actually solve that consumer divide of some sorts.
Could I just add to that?
Yeah.
So I'm coming at it from the perspective of somebody who's been in the industry for about 27 years. My perspective on it is, and pet peeve is, it's a very cyclical industry. Those of you guys that are in this industry, you guys know what I'm talking about. It's very cyclical. It's not recession-proof. So to me, if I could wave a magic wand, that's an AI magic wand, it would be to have more software-based solutions incorporated into the business so that we can withstand some of the downturns that we go through in this business over the course of time.
Great. Tom, anything you want to add?
Well, not first, before I get on to automotive, my pet peeve of Gen AI is my picture up there, which is created by, I thought I needed new profile pictures, so I used Gen AI to do it, which has created one where I look like, well, I won't say it, but I look like I've got a problem. And it's staring at me as well. My mum wouldn't be proud. But I think, look, I'd probably take it slightly differently. I think that there's a piece around where everyone thinks AI is going to fix everything, Gen AI is going to fix everything. I think in the auto industry, for me at the moment, is actually just a bit of intelligence we need. So, we're really focused on building the car, but we're not thinking about the infrastructure as much. We're not thinking about the whole holistic experience. And I think, the analogy we've used a couple of times, it's like building the iPhone without building the internet. And I feel like that's where we are a little bit at the moment for a segment of the customers.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good analogy with the iPhone as well. It's almost pre the App Store having that environment around there. The phone was just a phone, and now it's got that whole ecosystem. It's become a lot more powerful. So I think that's a really good analogy. So putting our wands away now and getting a little bit more realistic, what is it in the next 2 years that they think we can achieve meaningfully? I know we've all been through, as you said, this cycle many times of hype and excitement, and I think there's probably proposals and pitch decks we can dust off from 20 years ago that we haven't been able to achieve. So what do we think we can meaningfully do in the next 2 years, and what excites you? And when do you kick us off, Bob?
Yeah, so within automotive specifically, I'd look at 4 areas: manufacturing, engineering, supply chain, and customer experience. I think those 4 areas are where we can make meaningful progress here in the coming years. If you look at some of the stuff that we've done in my company, we've put a lot of focus in those areas. We'll continue to put focus on those areas, and I would assume that the rest of the industry is also going to do a lot the same in those 4 categories specifically.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, the manufacturing side of it is a really interesting angle as well, because of the speed at which the market is moving at the moment and the pace at which it's changing. And then you've got a vehicle lockdown life cycle of maybe 2-3 years ago, and the technology that's going to be relevant by the time that actually launches maybe other days. So I think there's absolutely innovations that need to happen so that we can keep abreast with the pace of change. What about you, Elizabeth?
I'm going to say I'm keying in a little bit about maybe more how the culture can change in the next couple of years. I think not just our industry, but many industries are heading into the time of forced constraints. You mentioned the pitch decks. Money is not flowing the way it normally does. We have to become much scrappier with less, and that's where great innovation comes from. So I'm pretty excited about the way companies and the way we and our employees, et cetera, will be able to work together to tease out some of these innovations. I'm not gonna go through the list of ones I came up with as I was doing some research, but Post-its is one of my favorite. The innovation was they had limitations on the glue, so they could only put the strip on the back, and now we have all the Post-its, right? But I think this sort of forced constraint mentality is gonna be awesome if companies and we can adapt to it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the new competitors that are coming into this space and changing the way things are done, I think is helping us all realize that and shake up a little bit and look up and say, well, what can we do? Tom, thoughts? Yeah,
so specifically over the next couple of years in this industry, I think something we've been looking at for a bit is going back to that point, which I think is around basically creating the infrastructure for these vehicles to actually be able to exist. And we started to look at almost the charge anxiety and how do we get that infrastructure, speaking specifically about the UK, how do we get that infrastructure to everyone, just not people that have obviously got a driveway. And then actually when you think about it, the cars are going to be the third wave of data consumption after social and after music and video streaming. So it will be the next one. And I don't think telcos got that right. I think they let that happen to them. So it's not just a charge anxiety. It'll go to data anxiety as all of these cars, are constantly updating. There's gigabytes per week going into them. And then that's even before autonomous vehicles, and a lot of this is safety stuff as well. So, you're not getting to a point where it's just, I need to be able to charge. Actually, I need to be able to update the car as well. So I think it does go for me back to that, that holistic experience that we've got to start to think about of all of the elements and maybe see a bit more of an ecosystem of partners trying to solve these things together rather than just everyone focus on their own part.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that data point is such a key topic as well. There's already so much being generated that we can't really leverage in a meaningful way because we're doing it in our own silos, because we're doing it without the connection, the ecosystem. And I think that's going to be a real interesting competition space, shall we say, over the coming years as we see who we partner with, who we compete against. But yeah, very good point. Bob, I'm curious with General Motors' 100-year history. You've weathered a few storms over the years. There's been, obviously, we're in a very turbulent time at the moment, but we've been at many turbulent times before, and GM has kind of thrived throughout. So I'm really, what's the thought and the discussion and kind of the conversations happening internally at GM around AI? Are you seeing it as a threat, as an opportunity, as a fad that's going to go? How central is it to your strategy for the future?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I would say, out of those three options, we look at it as an opportunity. For us, we've been at I'll call it machine learning, AI space for a number of years now. This is not something that we're just getting into right now. We've been at it for a number of years. Granted, we just, and we announced this publicly, we just announced our chief AI officer that we just hired, Barak Turovsky. We just hired him from the outside, so that's something new within our organization. The other thing that I would just say, and you kind of touched on it earlier, is when you think about lifecycle management and vehicle lifecycle management, you have model year changeovers, you have mid-cycle enhancements, and then software coming along. It's tough to marry those two. So one of the things that we're looking at, for instance, is how can we maybe in some cases tighten the span of the overall product lifecycle management for the hardware itself, and in the process, can we somehow get better at marrying the hardware and the software piece together through the use of AI? So that's definitely something that we're looking at today.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And then Elizabeth, I know before we've talked a lot about the future of ownership and how we can move away from a more transactional interaction when financing a car with someone. So not just about, what can I afford, what's the interest, but actually we're really adding value and thinking innovatively about the future. And what are your kind of thoughts over what ownership and mobility might look like in the future?
I'm actually just real quick, I want to go back on sort of the use case of AI, because I think, again, coming from the financial services aspect, we, like many other financial services companies, clearly see a lot of valuable use cases in the use of AI and machine learning when it comes to underwriting, fraud, KYC, because we work so much, just like any other bank, so much with customer data. So I think inherently financial services has tons of opportunity to, frankly, create better products, create better interactions, but also protect customers differently and protect ourselves differently. So that's just sort of in general, and I think still frankly, lots to explore and lots to do. In terms of ownership and mobility, I think anyone here on the stage could probably say that code has not been cracked yet in terms of usage versus ownership, what is the right mix, who uses those models, who doesn't use them, who's a subscription customer, who's a leasing customer, insert the blank. I think the need for a successful usage-based model will absolutely continue. I think, two things, if you look at what's going on, right? One, folks are getting a little bit older. That also means the younger generation who would be using usage-based actually moving out a little bit more out of the urban areas, et cetera, which means these models have to span further distances. So just ride sharing may not be enough anymore as they move further outside of urban areas. And then I was just actually listening to something this morning around that generation also being heavily financed by their parents who are baby boomers. So if they can buy houses, they will buy houses, they will move further out. So all this sort of urban development, usage-based models, and the generation growing up a little bit, I think will be quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it will land. It's just a question where, right?
Yeah, it makes you think, even walking around here in Austin, how many of these buildings are car parks, prime downtown real estate being taken up by the need to park cars. And when we get to some version of this in the future, it's not just our car ownership experience is going to change. The whole way our cities are built are going to change, because that state can suddenly be used for something much more richly, much more unique, because your car can be shared or owned or fewer cars per head. Speaking of infrastructure, Tom, I know you've done a lot of work in the UK around how we can democratize EV charging, how we can leverage existing investments already made in infrastructure to be ready for this new EV wave. But I feel like there's a lot more still to be done. What are your thoughts on where we need to focus over the next couple of years to really, truly make EV a viable option and get that customer demand back?
Great question, and it's definitely, as we've started to look at this category, probably only for about 18 months. It's interesting how many people have a view that it's, we've got a, why bother looking at slow to medium charge when we need petrol stations to do the super duper charge? I don't think that's the exact phrase you're supposed to use. And I think so I think the bit for me that's missing, again, as a product designer, is just what's the customer problem? What is it that the customers want? Then you're trying to design a solution around that. And I think the first thing is 30 to 40% of people don't have off-street parking. That's very similar to North America as well. So straight away, we haven't solved that. And the industry is just expecting everyone to have a driveway, and therefore, that customer set is okay, and they can just get their charger on the drive, and obviously the data updates as well. So it's about that. But then when you think about, at the moment today, I think there's a stat that comes out which is batteries can cover 75% of your journeys today. With battery technology moving forward, that'll go to 95%. So there's a real need to solve that habitual charging. I've got home and I just want to charge. And what we found as we were going through a load of design research is customers want to charge their car like they do their phone. They want to just plug it in overnight, forget about it, and get on. So there's a real need, to fix that type of infrastructure. We announced at CES last year that we were taking all of the, and apologies for no one in the UK, but the green cabinets that are on every single street in the UK. They used to provide all of the traditional telco, the narrowband, broadband, and since that's becoming redundant as you go to full fibre, then obviously what you've got on every street is power, and that's just one example of it. Another example, we worked with a startup called Trojan, and they've got basically a wand that you three-quarter turn into a road and take out. So there are going to be streets where you don't want to leave more street furniture, which again I think is another great innovation. I think more of that's required, rather than just going straight to how do we replicate the petrol station in the future. Now, some of that's going to be needed, especially for fleet, but I think that's probably where we need to really get thinking. And then probably the final part is, if you get to a point where you talked about all of these buildings and most of them are car parks, and again, I think your car is parked doing nothing for about 90% of the time, then actually how does it become a virtual power bank? How much more could it be back into the grid? And that's where AI obviously is absolutely needed for those types of things. So I think as soon as you solve one or two bits, I think you create huge opportunities and huge industry upsides as well.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that the danger or the challenge that we all have in front of us is to not just redo what we've done before in an EV way, but to really stop and pause and say what changes, how other things this can impact. I think it's it's a big challenge because the easiest one is just to say, right, yeah, petrol stations now do charging, but actually we'll be missing a huge trick. You're absolutely right. So we've talked a lot about some of the what's, the things we can do in this new world, but I don't think we've discussed enough yet the who is going to do it. And I think fundamentally, I know we at CINT are reflecting on this a lot. Our team makeups will change, the type of people and how our team topologies, how we organize teams will differ. And I was really curious on your view on this, Bob, especially in GM with such a long heritage. What have you started thinking about? What type of talent you're going to need to nurture moving forward in this AI-first world?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the way that we're looking at it is we want people that are wanting to be part of an innovation-minded culture. People that are willing and able to use different technology and tools, including AI, and that is just one tool in the toolbox. I like to use the term building and flying the plane. Just, I think, given the stuff that I've been doing like the last 15 years of my career particularly, people that are comfortable with building and flying the plane at the same time, so you're literally developing as you go. When you get into people that we're looking for specifically to work on AI, I'd get into these types of areas, and there's 4 of them. There's cybersecurity, so people that are really into cybersecurity, people that are into privacy, people that are into safety, people that are into ethical business decisions. And when I say all that, I mean from call it like a standards and protocols perspective, that people are coming at it with those things in mind. And there's obviously other things as well, but those are really 4 core attributes that I would say that we're looking for in people that we're going to be bringing onto the team to work on AI-related stuff going forward.
Interesting.
Could I just add on the culture thing? I think there's a part around how you embed AI, and there's a lot of AI first thinking. I think it's just as we've always tried, which is if you've got the right people that are just curious, which smaller companies, startups, incubation areas, you normally get those types of people. Probably because they can't hold a job down in a normal job, so that they go to those types of things, and those are the guys that are when Agile and Lean first happened, they're taking it to the level which is cultural, and really trying to embed it into an organization, and I see AI being the same and Gen AI being the same, which is how does it help me do my job? How do I become better? How do I become efficient? I see it with you guys and with CINT as well. You do it in abundance, and I think they're the types of people that will just lap it up, and they'll tell the organization the best way to use this stuff, which is a challenge, because I'm in a 200-year-old business. These guys have also been around for a while as well. It's I think that's the hard bit is how you get those people and really try to push that way of thinking back into the organization, and get away from the fact of stop worrying it's going to take your job. Actually, it's going to help. And there was a quote at Collision last year, which is, it's the calculator of our time. I think that's the way we need to be thinking about it. Is you've got to be using it all the time, or you will get left behind.
Yeah, I think. Sorry.
I was about to say now we're totally on a roll here, but I want to double down on your sort of curiosity aspect, because I think curiosity in the past has been sort of the thing that can make or break, in particular when you're trying to figure things out, and is even more important now. Similar, Bob, to what you were saying, sort of this notion of what are the hard skills we're looking for, but also where are the softer skills. So, as you said, cyber, privacy, security, these are all, frankly, certain crafts are evolving, and developing either hard knowledge or hard skills in this area will be important and is important. I feel like call it the softer skilled areas, and hopefully no one's offended by it, but I'm a product manager at heart. I think the role of a product manager will change. I think, moving more into becoming, frankly, a master orchestrator who can get shit done in an organization will become, arguably already is, but become even more important than really I am a, product manager or a product owner. I do it exactly the way the methodology calls for, et cetera. There's going to be so many ways for that to be helped out and evolved, and that ability to orchestrate and actually bring the organization along and show how it can work is going to be key.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice analogy as well, and that increasing role of the product manager, or potentially increasing role of the product manager. I think going back to what you were saying as well, Tom, about these people who are lean in and kind of excited by that. I think we had a lot of early success with that, but what we found was it was that next gap. It's like, then how do we get the next majority in who aren't those lean in? And I think that's where we've had to get more prescriptive and share some of those case stories and put some of those frameworks in place. And I think when we
sack them.
Yeah. And I think, particularly when we get into the automotive industry, I think we're going to see a lot of that. Maybe even more of that mentality because of the kind of engineering background and how regulated we have to be in that manufacturing process, that actually it's hard to inject some of those changes and that mindset shift. So I think we're going to have those pioneers, but I think we've got a huge job to do to then codify that and say this is how we then break down something which hasn't really evolved a lot in terms of the manufacturing process in many years. So yeah, interesting space for sure. Yeah, I just wanted to circle back onto the data topic as well, Elizabeth, because I know obviously with your exposure at Volkswagen Financial Services, not only do we have all the kind of car and the connected data, but we've also started to see some of the customer data, the finance data, the usage data, and start to put a profile. Where do you think we could do better in the future to kind of connect all that data we're getting to make meaningful customer experiences?
I mean, that's always a big question, right? I think the one area where none of these data sets actually get you to extraordinarily well is behavioral data, right? So financial data gives you a lot of, it's behavioral inherently, but it may give you things like payment histories or things you're doing on a website, et cetera. Of course, the car and the vehicle data gives you a certain set of behavioral data, but sort of inferring what a customer is actually doing, I believe, is still not quite refined enough. And where I see a lot of opportunity as we move into the future, sort of those, I mean, it's way overused, but arguably the next best sort of capabilities and those being supercharged is what I'm looking forward to, in particular on the customer side. I do think where it will get really interesting when we start to, in the financial services side, connect even more disparate data sources of customers. Generally, we of course use, where appropriate, we can have access to and use our own customers' data, but not so much third-party data. I think there's a lot of great stuff we can do and will be looking at, but the other thing in financial services, you always proceed with caution. It is people's money, right? And it's very important. So. But I do think just sort of I use the word orchestration all the time. I'm going to use it again. The orchestration and the use and the sort of predictive modeling that comes out of it is really where the superpower lies. It's not so much which data, but what we're doing with it and how it's being sort of summarized and used.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting your comment about it's financial data, so we're going to be careful with it. We've been doing some experiments recently, leveraging data sets from residual values of a car, the incentives that all the different manufacturers are offering, your own personal credit history, so what loan rate you can get, to categorically prove to customers this is the best deal for you. So you may have wanted this car and you're searching for this car, but actually this is better. And it could be a more expensive car or whatever, but because of the way the whole mechanics work, this is better. And interestingly, people don't believe us. Like, it's really hard to convince that because people are used to maybe sometimes historically, stereotypically, an antagonistic negotiation in the dealership, that this level of transparency, they assume something's missed. So I think even with all that tool there, we've still got a whole wave of customer behavioral stuff to overcome to actually leverage that data in a meaningful way. Sorry, Bob.
No, I was just going to add to that, like, just the other part of it too is the economic conditions. When you think about like type of sale, whether it's PIN data from JD Power and you're looking at cash, lease, or finance, in addition to all the great things Elizabeth said, in addition to that and what you said, there's the economics, and then you can look over time and see how that affects those three type of sale types of, purchases, or how people are purchasing vehicles or not over the course of time. It will be impacted by that too.
Yeah, especially at the moment with the kind of turbulence around pricing. So
I mean, I was about to say the industry that's really interesting to look at in this space as well, primarily because I feel like it's actually been a leader in the past, is around the credit card industry, because that very, very quick dynamic underwriting and dynamic pricing and approving of transactions, et cetera, the credit card industry has had to have a real leg up in this space. And I think on the lending side, it just isn't quite as dynamic from a purchasing perspective. But I think back to the curiosity topic, that's a lot of where I look to be inspired from.
I think just weaving in your dealership point and the data from a financial point, I think as long as we get to, and I think banking, some banks, not all of them, have done a good job on this, which is just, let's just revolutionize what that experience should be, you know, rather than trying to improve it on the edges or make our own businesses more efficient. Ultimately, does the customer feel completely different in this world? You know, Tesla have gone to some form of that, but you know, just rethink it completely. You know, you guys were talking about like the usage models and do you want to buy a car? You know, there's got to be other ways of doing it, and there's been a few startups looking at it. But I think that's the part which is, it probably needs the big shake up. Data is going to be a driver for us, but ultimately it's got to be what's that customer challenge and you know, how does the customer feel? You know, we always talk about, you know, have we really created a magical moment in a customer's lives during the design process? And I don't think in this industry we have for a while, you know, and I think that's what's that, you know, real aha moment, I think.
Well, and I actually, just to double down on that, I think where AI will play a huge part is sort of in this, for lack of a better word, secret sauce moment. So there's so many latent customer needs, right? That customer, I use the example of prior to Netflix streaming or launching streaming services, customers likely wouldn't have said, yes, I no longer want these DVDs. I want everything on my laptop. That likely never came out in a survey or any sort of VOC type of stuff. However, once it came, it just took off. I would have not have pegged myself a binge watcher. I am a total binge watcher now, right? Those words would have never come across my lips, and now I usually use it every day. So the latent needs and those latent sort of customer behaviors are the ones where AI also think will play a bigger part.
Yeah, and I think there's probably even more in the automotive industry than in other areas because of some of the disconnect that Tom was talking around as well. We've got, you know, you've got the manufacturer creating the car. We've got the franchisees, they're marketing it in a very different way. We've got different departments within each one of those, whether they're selling a new car, used car, after sales, and we're all competing for the customer's attention. And actually, it's such a fragmented journey that actually some of the things we can build and we can create these great experiences, but actually getting them to the customer in the right way and I think that's where the shake-up's going to need to be, is how we work with our dealership partners to say we've now got the ability to create this unified experience. We've now got the ability to create some real differentiation and magic moments with our customers. But we're going to need to change the model because we can't do that with 58 different partners on 100 different dealer management systems. And so I think that's where that shake-up can come, and we can really, really leverage that.
Well, and that end-to-end value chain isn't necessarily clear, right? So no one looks and says, oh, you know, after sales and, you know, at the dealership and parts and insurance and warranties, they all fully understand how they fit together in the value chain for a customer. I mean, inherently you do, but it's not as sort of deliberate as it can be.
Yeah, and completely overwhelming for customers, I imagine. So we've talked a lot about things that we would change, things that we'd like to change, but I think as technology enthusiasts, we probably spend a lot of time thinking about if we could do it and less time thinking about if we should do it. So yeah, Jurassic Park references aside, what do you think we shouldn't touch? What should we leave as it is? Do you want to go, Bob?
Yeah, I would love to start with this one. So I'm going to go back a few years when I actually started my career in this business, and I'm dating myself by saying this, but if you wanted to work in sales and marketing in the automotive industry 25 plus years ago, there was a very good chance that you started on the phones talking to customers. You talked to the end customer, the consumer, you talked to the dealers, and you did it daily. And so if anybody in here works in sales and marketing and you worked 25 plus years ago. I see you nodding your head. You know what I'm talking about. We talk to customers regularly. The thing that I really hope that we preserve going forward and we keep intact is that emotional connection between the company and the customer. We've already taken away some of that, so I don't know that we're talking to customers as much as we used to 25 plus years ago, but I really hope that we continue to preserve that emotional bond between the customers going forward. That to me is key. It's critical, it's very important. So as you're thinking about governance and guiding principles as your companies are implementing AI and AI initiatives, I would encourage you to think about a guiding principle of making sure that the machine is not having that final say and having that final interaction with the customer.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think there's ways where we can, from the outset, have that as set as a goal. Like I know if you spend a day in a dealership with some of the staff there and see all these tools they have to use, I mean, I don't know how they get a minute free to talk to the customer because they're entering data into 15 different systems. And then so if we could simplify that, then we can give them more time back with the customer. That feels like a great thing to do. Elizabeth, any thought? What shouldn't we do?
I was about to say, you said it better than I would, but I am going to double down on it. I think keeping the connection to the customer, regardless through what channel or means, or if it's through the dealer or directly. And I think with that, in particular with our dealer partners, staying connected to the communities in which our customers live, I think sort of that IRL social connectiveness is quite key, and I really would double down on maintaining that in the future.
What are your thoughts on? Sorry. What are your thoughts on now we're seeing? I hate to use the word chatbots, but yeah, chatbots, which is kind of so real now that we're almost indistinguishable from chatting to someone. Is that ever got a place to replace people in that way, or is that we still need that human connection? Is one functional and one connection?
Yeah, I think we've seen it in the core part of the business. So BT own EE, largest telco in the UK, and I think what they've done is actually just blended it quite well. So it just means that the real persons are dealing with the real problems or creating better experiences, and the stuff that should be done quickly and the customer wants sorted out quickly and wants to get through really, really quick. Whether that's through chatbot, WhatsApp do it now, and obviously getting through to a call. I think you just got to blend. You got to blend them all, and I think going back to Bob's point, as long as when we're saying we're talking to the customer, obviously talking, watching, seeing, but also the data that's coming out of the vehicles. What are we doing with that? Because there must be some really interesting design insights coming from usage from those parts as well.
Absolutely. And I know you've been in the warm-ups to this panel pretty vocal around changes that are needed in the automotive space. But yeah, just the same question to you: is there anything we shouldn't change? Anything you think is working well?
So what we should, I think, it sort of goes on to Bob's point a little bit. I feel as though, and apologies, I'll exaggerate to make the point. I feel as though every vehicle that's coming out looks like it's designed to be in space. From an EV point of view, because EV is new and different, therefore the vehicle needs to look different. I feel like we're losing some of the beauty of design from some of the automotive industry we've seen previously. Again, I exaggerate to make the point. It's not the same for all. Also, the physical vehicles now can be different as well because you haven't got a combustion engine in there, so let's rethink how we're using it. Good friend of mine, Yves Bahar, great designer. He's designed the Tello, and because you haven't got the engine, it's just he's looking at how you could create a pickup that's got the same space at the back as a Ford, but actually the whole length of it is the same as a Mini. It's incredible when you see the two. Going for those two stats, if you like. That's the first one. I think the second one, and weirdly we saw this about a decade ago in design for digital and UI, which is we all went to the touchscreens. EV or exaggeration of that. It's all touchscreen. And it just means that a lot of the behaviors that are much easier to do through physical, whether that's turning a dial, like turning your heating up, is now 15 touches on a screen, and that's the driver doing that, and it's just, it feels like we've gone backwards. And I remember BMW going back to a dial, about 10 years ago, and I think there's some of that stuff that feels as though, in the design world, just because you can do it, you shouldn't do it. And I think for me, it's definitely the digital experience inside when you're watching, your Uber driver, probably in a Tesla, having to, touch 15 different things to get "Do You Want to Dance with Somebody" by Whitney Houston to come on. I think that's the bit that feels a bit odd, and I wouldn't change it.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good example. Although I've noticed VW doing some really interesting stuff with integrating ChatGPT into the ID, their new electric vehicles. And actually that feels like, well, that's a very good use case for change, because here you're using your voice, and finally a voice that's working well enough to understand what you want to do to control some key functions and reduce distraction for the driver. So we've got about five minutes left, and I wanted to wrap up with some questions a little bit further ahead, test your divination skills. So for now, we've been focusing on the next 2 years, which is probably, given how fast the industry is changing, probably the only thing we can do with any confidence. But let's test some bets for the future. So thinking further ahead, five years plus, what do you think? And I'm gonna do some automotive ones, and then outside the industry, to give Tom a break from having to talk about cars all day. But yeah, let's start with you, Bob. I'm not going to hold you to this, so feel free to take a wide swing. I won't be calling you in 5 years. Yeah, what do you think? What do you think is going to happen in 5+ years?
Well, I mean, I think every automaker, a lot of suppliers, we all look at mega trends, that are going on in the world. We have different views on what the mega trends are that are going on globally. And then looking beyond that, there's things like weak indicators, if you will, of what else could be going on in the world that will impact the business or the industry. So something that I talked about a couple of years ago at an event, and I'll bring it up again because I feel very much like it could happen. If you look further out in that 5 to 10 year window and maybe even beyond, I think about stuff like brain-to-device interface, and whether it's intrusive or it's not. I think the signs are there today of that world coming. And if you think about all the wonderful things that are happening in the transportation space that could work with that, it's really fascinating. So when you leave here, you go back to wherever home is, assuming you flew here, you get off the airplane, think about a world where, the system knows your profile, and then there's criteria within that system. Time of day, willingness to pay, what's your personality like? Are you introvert, are you extrovert? Those kinds of things. And think about what could happen from a transportation perspective that could marry you with the system and provide you with different solutions. And think about where the world is heading with those solutions and what could be waiting for you when you walk outside the airport. I feel like that could very well happen. So that's my perspective.
Mildly terrifying, but yeah, that's definitely a big swing. I like it. Elizabeth, what?
So I think for me, similar to what you're saying in terms of some of the mega trends we're seeing, I mean, I think one of the ones that I'm intrigued by is sort of the aging of the population. And I think the first time since the bubonic plague, the population number is actually going down over the next 5 to 10 years. So I think that aging of the population inherently will bring and provide opportunities for transportation or other technologies to frankly assist an older population, older workforce, a longer living population, and the ecosystem around them, be it caregivers, be it children of said older people. So I don't know exactly what it will be, but I think the space around people living longer, the workforce becoming older, and the population going down will provide opportunities, transportation, accessibility, devices, et cetera, that I think will be really important.
Very cool. And Tom, I said I'd give you a break from automotive. So yeah, not thinking about automotive. Where's your big swing for 5 years?
So I wasn't going to talk about it, but on the health side, it's something that we've, in a couple of different places and startups we've looked at. And I agree. I think technology in health, especially aging, caregivers, care at home. The challenge that I don't know what it's like in North America, but for the GPs, for the doctors, there's got to be technology. It's got to help those guys. The inefficiencies of running a hospital. We've watched it. We watched the nurses how they do it. I think we worked out it was like 5 meetings a day just to update a whiteboard of who's in a bed. Just things like that. You've got to help these guys. That's where technology really helps them then to do their brilliant job, which is looking after people. But I think for me, a couple that we're working on. One is a product called Active Intel, which is a data and AI product. We have about 25 billion data points a day that are anonymized, and it allows us to create movement analysis and insight. So think about almost like gives you Google Analytics in the real world, for retail and for media, but going a bit deeper for government, for police in times of trouble. It means where people are, what types of people are in certain positions, and therefore you can help a lot more. The founder of that part of the business actually was in the Ariana Grande bombing in Manchester, and one of the things that came out of that was the emergency services were in the wrong place because they didn't have enough data. And you just think, if you can provide that's a fantastic movement. And I think the other one for us that we're really driving, and we're trying to unlock the skies, which is for drones. And our founder on drones talks about if it's dull, dangerous, or dirty, send a drone, which I quite like, in terms of some of those jobs. Everyone, I think, goes straight to your Amazon package coming with a drone, but actually now start to think about getting vital organs or bloods from hospital to hospital. So I think it's we're working really hard with a couple of other partners on beyond line of sight drone flight, so where you don't need a pilot seeing it and it's just autonomous flying. And I think that's where it really does open up for every industry. I think every industry will be impacted by that drone flight.
Very productive, yeah. Very, very interesting. I think I was watching Distracted on LinkedIn earlier with a drone cleaning a sea tanker out in the middle of the ocean or something. But yeah, very many use cases. Thank you very much, folks. That was a very interesting conversation. We've now got 10 minutes for questions. If anyone does want to ask any questions to the panel, you can come to that microphone and form a line there. No pressure. First up, well done. Kudos to you.
Hey, thanks, that was great. A couple things. Orchestration, I use the same thing in my company. I love orchestration. But along that theme, looking at all of your jobs are trying to push forward into new areas. The tradition of change management, and you're surrounded by privacy and security. What are some of the challenges you're seeing in trying to push a new idea forward when you're dealing, and oftentimes with legacy companies and people who think in certain ways? So.
I can start with that one. So one of the philosophies that I personally have taken on within my company is, and it's not perfect. It's not a perfect layout of thinking, if you will, but it follows very much linear for me. Is if you have, this agrees with internal policy or process on one end, and you have breaking the law on the other end, somewhere along that spectrum is varying degrees of making people uncomfortable. And I feel like I've gotten really good in my company over the course of time, especially the last 15 years, in pushing that envelope of making people uncomfortable and being successful with bringing new things forward and keeping my job and getting promoted. and all joking aside about that, I'm really big on creating new opportunities that end up leading to new jobs for people, promotions for other people. People will springboard from there to do other things. So all joking aside about my own stuff, I do enjoy the idea of creating stuff that helps others as well.
Sorry, I was just going to add that I think it is absolutely the hardest thing. I think I'm just an idiot, and I've worked in two 200-year-old businesses. And I think like for the CEO type figure, I think it is just hard. But then I was being a startup, and that's hard, And I think that a big part of it also, I do like them, sort of making people feel uncomfortable. Absolutely, there is disruptive thinking, but I think if you've got storytelling with it, and you can bring people along on that journey, which are sort of going on what you're saying there, I think and excite people, and I think if you get people that are in the legacy business and they're excited and almost you had pride, and they're thinking, I never thought we would do this, and I think that's something if you can encapsulate that.
One more piece on that, because I think the other aspect is sort of, I hate the word harnessing, but sort of harnessing sort of the internal superpowers, because the reality is, you need the people who deeply understand the policies, the procedures, the change management in order to push the envelope. So if you can just find the folks who are willing to sort of partner, which many are, and who actually know the ins and outs of the space and what you're seeking to achieve, you don't really have to push that hard, to be honest with you. But they really have to know it. They have to understand how to work it.
Next question.
Great, thank you. I'm an early stage venture capital investor in the mobility and automotive industry, and we're seeing a bunch of AI agent companies right now, whether it's the dealer or sales or in vehicle. And it seems to me it's one of these classic battles we have in automotive, but now between like the handset and telematics. And I'm curious, as you guys think about build versus buy, who wins in this experience as it relates to the vehicle?
I don't mind jumping quickly with just and then pass over to the team. I think one thing we've seen a lot of is in this industry is that the huge fragmentation. So if you look at like Lithia Motors Group, one of the largest auto retailers here in the US, and their market share is 3%. So if the largest is 3%, it starts to give you an idea of how fragmented the market is. So whenever any of these new tools come in, particularly those that are kind of helping with either the sales or the marketing process, the challenge we find often isn't the build or the buy, it's the scale. How do we get this to enough meaningful dealerships, points, customers to actually make it worthwhile? Because I think that's the challenge we see time and time again in the auto industry, is that we're having to build the integration into 15, 16, 700 different installations. So that's the challenge we see. Anything else?
I was about to say from our perspective and from my perspective, it's not simple, but it's clear and clean to say, for me, it's you build what is core to you, right? Sort of proprietary, what needs to be proprietary is what is core to your business. In that sense, the commodities, buying commodities, right, is less of an issue. I agree with you on sort of now how do you bring it all together? But keeping really what is core to your business and core to what makes the business tick tends to be where I believe the internal investment is best kept and by the commodities.
I would just quickly add that, Jessica, you mentioned build versus buy. I would add partner to that as well. And to me, that's just something that if you're looking at technology A, B, or C, or AI, it's the same across the board in the sense of looking at it that way. What do we want to build ourselves versus buy versus partner? One thing that feels like it's happening more within the industry is there's more of a desire to build it yourself. That feels like it's happening. But I do still think that there's good opportunities to buy or to partner with other companies. I think in the case of like AI, there's so many AI startups that are out there right now that setting yourself apart from others, to me, is very difficult, but it's incredibly important to be able to do that.
Cool.
Hi, I have a question on how AI is organizationally managed within your companies. That's probably more towards you, Robert, and you, Elizabeth. Would you say it's handled well, and do you guys already have a holistic strategy in place, or is it still more operated in silos in different departments, everyone doing their own thing? So are your companies doing it well already, and how are they doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start. I think we've been doing it well. I think that by getting a chief AI officer on board, and that person is responsible for clarifying, setting, if you will, the vision, and then the strategy to support that, and then executing on that. I think that will help crystallize where our company has already been heading over the course of several years. We've been, as I said earlier, we've been working in the AI ML space for several years now. So I think that will just help to crystallize it. And you know, with a very large company, it is tough to have everything streamlined, but I think that too will be beneficial by having that person on board and then building out a team to support them.
Anything to add? Another question?
Hi. Curious to understand how you see the impact of AI on manufacturing, especially everything we see related to humanoid robots that seems to be coming to many factories and finding more and more success.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we're starting to now talk about all the great things that we have been doing and we're now implementing in manufacturing. I know that other automakers are doing the same thing, and other automakers are also very focused on manufacturing. If I go back to like those 4 things I mentioned earlier, there's manufacturing, engineering, supply chain, and customer experience. It does feel like manufacturing is a very heavy emphasis for all of us, my company included. I look at it this way, and what we're doing with AI as it relates to manufacturing is we're taking situations where you could have AI be put in place to help reduce downtime, to help mitigate situations where people might be put in harm's way, so to say, so that they can be, you know, taken out of situations and be able to focus on quality and craftsmanship. So from our perspective, it's been a real benefit to our business, and you'll hear more about that as we go forward in terms of what we do with it.
Awesome. We have time for one final question.
So personalization is often touted as one of the big benefits of AI. Where do you think the opportunities are to integrate personalization effectively within the automotive customer journey?
It's funny. I'll just say, like, you really took me back in time there, because within automotive, there's build combinations, you know, and people are like, we want to have fewer build combinations or we want to have a lot. And if you talk to the marketing people and salespeople, they want to have a lot because, you know, one customer might want the pink, you know, vehicle. And so I smile because I do agree with you. I think that it does open the door for more personalization opportunity. But at the same time, that has to be managed within the bounds of what makes sense from a, you know, a perspective of designing, building, selling those vehicles, you know, going forward. So, yeah, it'll benefit it. That will definitely be there, but we'll see how much it really impacts it.
I've got to say the personalization space I find interesting when it goes more clearly on the hardware side, but then also further into the software, right? Be it being much more personalized beyond, right, the seat, the steering wheel, the position of the mirror, et cetera, but being more nuanced in the settings or where you may have come from last or where you may be headed. You know, just like Waze knows every morning when I'm going to work, and it says and it doesn't ask me on Saturday mornings when I get in the car, it only asks me on Friday mornings. So really those aspects becoming more and more intuitive in the way people use and move with their transportation, I think will be really interesting.
I was just going to add, I agree. I think on the digital side is where it gets really interesting, and maybe AI can really help the experience when more thought is needed around accessibility or neurodiversity. You know, do you want to see something different, be treated differently in that experience at that point? I think that's maybe where AI can help a lot.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much to all my panelists for joining me up here. Thank you to all of us for joining, and have a great rest of South by Southwest.